Labdien, mediju pārstāvji!
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's press conference, which is devoted to the Informal Council of the Minister of Environment and Energy. And today, here we have the Minister of Environment Protection and Regional Development, Mr. Kaspars Gerhards, the Minister of Economy, Reizniece-Ozola, and the European Environment, Maritime Affairs and Fisheries Council, Karmenu, Vella. Let's start with Mr. Gerhards, please. Thank you. Commissioner, Madam Minister, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to welcome you to the press conference organized on the occasion of Informal Environment and Energy Ministerial Council joint session. Today, we had a meeting of the ministers of two important areas, environment and energy. They discussed how to achieve mutually beneficial solutions when implementing the policies devoted to the protection of biological diversity and energy. The strategy on energy union provides for the increase of renewable energy resources. Europe has planned to be the leading area in the use of the renewable energy resources. However, this should not take place at the expense of biodiversity. We have committed ourselves to halt the loss of biodiversity. Yesterday, during the discussion of the Ministers of Environment, we concluded that a lot should be done in this area. Today's discussion will offer us solutions that will allow us both to increase the use of renewable energy resources as well as preserve the biological diversity. I would like to underline that in order to find the win-win solutions, we need the cooperation not only between the sectors of energy and environment, but also we have to involve the agriculture and forestry sectors in this discussion. The opinion was voiced that solutions should be found at the national and local level. And here it's very important to underline that we need to raise the public awareness and we should better inform those taking the decisions. As we heard in today's discussions, the good solutions are possible, though the rules of the game should be clear. And finally, I would like to inform you that we will prepare the presidency's summary based on today's discussion, and I'm sure that it will be a very valuable contribution in future discussions about the issues of biological diversity as well as a practical implementation of the energy union. Thank you.
Paldies ministram Gerhardam, un tagad vārds.
Thank you to the Minister Gerhardt, and now I give the floor to the Minister for Economy. Thank you, Commissioner, Mr. Minister, and welcome to the journalists who participate in this press conference. I think this informal council was very interesting and very useful. It was for the first time that the energy and environmental ministers were sitting side by side discussing the topic on how to find the balance between producing renewable energy resources and conserving biodiversity. We know that Europe is the biggest energy importer in the world now, and we have serious plans on how to increase the share of renewable resources. Currently, it's about 15% of the total consumption, and in 2030, Europe has the target to reach at least 27% of the total consumption. And logical that in this situation we have to understand whether such a high increase of production of renewable energy, whether it would not be at the expense of biodiversity and nature, and so effectively on our quality of life. We can see many examples here in Latvia. Those who live here understand that there are some invasive species that were introduced to Latvia, and that was used in agriculture, and how to increase productiveness in the so to use as feed for animals, and eventually this invasive species is detrimental to our environment. Also, the small hydropower stations, the question is how to build them not putting a detrimental effect on fish species and on the environment. I think environmental minister can tell you more, share more examples of this. And so we had exchange of opinions today on what countries do at the national level to improve environmental solutions. One of the conclusions was that it's very important that at an early stage of the project development to give an opportunity for the public to express their opinion. And we can see that on the whole, there are various guidelines in the EU on environmental conditions that have to be met when developing energy infrastructure projects, but there is no strict legislation, in fact, and that was one of the aspects that ministers said. They said it would be good if there was level playing field. Level playing field, for example, when building new wind farms. And so if there are no clear rules of the game, there are many new foreign words coming into the language that are difficult then to get rid of. So it was very interesting discussion, very useful exchange of experience, and that is one of the main conclusions from today's meeting. That is, it's essential to share the good practice, and in the future meetings of our presidency, also during other presidencies, it would be a good idea to organize such interministerial meetings more and more. Because when we speak just within one area, within the competence of one ministry, we can see that it can't really work because there are many dimensions in every case. And today, I think we worked really well.
Paldies, Ministrei Reizniece.
Thank you, Minister. And now the floor goes to the Commissioner, please.
Thank you very much, Ministers. First of all, I have to thank the Latvian Presidency for bringing biodiversity and renewable energy to the list of the European Union priorities. The promotion of renewable energy is very central to the European Union's policies, and the objective is to create the right framework allowing to develop renewable energy sources in a cost-efficient and in a sustainable way. There are basically three main reasons why we need renewables. First of all, renewable energy can greatly contribute to climate change mitigation, and together with our effort to reduce energy demand and other lower carbon technology, renewables will allow us to achieve our climate objectives. Secondly, renewables are also key for energy security. We know that one of the priorities of the European Union is to be self-supporting as much as possible and to have this energy security. We are importing, the European Union is importing some 400 billion euros worth of energy every year. And we should remember, though, that without the existing renewables today, the importation would be some 30 billion euros higher than it actually is. Thirdly, shifting towards renewable energy represents also an opportunity towards growth and jobs within the European Union. Already today, the renewable energy existing in the European Union employs some 1 million persons already and has a turnover of 130 million euros. And this is one of the main reasons also why President Juncker put this as, and it is the ambition that Europe becomes the world #1 in renewable energy. However, in our efforts to achieve our climate and energy objectives, we must not forget about the other environmental goals and about the other environmental considerations, such as what we were discussing this morning, the preservation of our ecosystem and the preservation of our biodiversity as well. It is essential to ensure that these policy goals are reached in a mutually supportive way. We think, and we have discussed, that biodiversity protection and renewable energies could be two sides of the same coin. They could be mutually reinforcing, one contributing to the other and not one hindering the other. A particular emphasis in this context was the sustainable use also of bioenergy, which is still the biggest source of renewable LNG and which has become one of the main items of the political debate, and such concerns must obviously be adequately addressed by the EU. And this is why the renewable energy package, which the Commission will be bringing forward in 2010-17, will also include the new policy for sustainable bioenergy. Our climate and energy objectives may sound a little bit ambitious, but the stakes, if we don't achieve our targets, the stakes are too high for us not to be ambitious, and the momentum created by renewables for competitiveness, growth and jobs in Europe must continue. We must continue with our efforts, and with an energy union and climate targets powered by renewable energy, I believe that we can achieve our targets. One final comment is that we were very much encouraged to hear both from the energy as well as from the environment ministers about the importance of avoiding any negative impacts of renewable developments on biodiversity. And this is something which was agreed by each and every one of the ministers present there.
Thank you very much to the Commissioner Vella. Now the media representatives can ask questions. The working languages are Latvian and English. Please.
Yes, my name is Reizniece-Ozola. Today I'm again working for Spanish news agency EFI. And one of the problems with renewables is that they involve living organisms and plant life and trees and things like that. How are you going to solve the problem? Well, two problems. One, the over exploitation of forests for energy purposes. And we've seen what happens to managed forests that were grown actually for something else in Sweden when there was a tremendous storm where all of the trees that were all the same height and in rows were knocked down, and it was a disaster for Sweden. And there was a lot of firewood left over afterwards. The other thing is that we see it's more of a global problem, maybe not strictly a European problem, is that energy crops are displacing food crops. And also affecting the price of food in probably more in the third world and in Latin America than here. Where are things moving along on these issues?
Thank you very much. First of all, you are very right, obviously, when you talk about forests and the application and of biomass of forestry in renewable energies, and that is one thing that we are all trying to avoid. It has been also discussed and established this morning that different renewable energy processes have different benefits and different costs. We are talking about processes that could have synergies between biodiversity and energy, and we are also talking about processes that have trade-offs between biodiversity and energy. The whole objective of this morning's meeting was to see how we can maximize on the processes which synergize between the two and minimize on the processes that have trade-offs between the two. When it comes to the agricultural issue, yes, we are finding that in some area, because of the fact that you have already mentioned, we are moving towards a monoculture, agricultural monoculture, where just one crop is being used by farmers. That we are trying to move away from, because obviously it has a lot of negative effects. It has a financially rewarding aspect to the farmers, but it has also a negative environmental aspects to society as well.
And if I can add, I think in this context, something that's important is this ILUC legislative initiatives. And I have to say that yesterday in the European Parliament Environmental committee voted for, and I hope this month the Parliament in general will vote favorably for this initiative. And I was glad that our Brussels colleagues had done a lot in order to find an agreement between member states, and that is what is all about. It's about finding a balance between crops, those that are used for food or for biofuel, setting the 7% are used for this first generation crops. And it's important that only residues are used for energy rather than for crops, rather than for food. And that's an answer how to find the balance. Thank you.
Ewa Krukowska, Bloomberg News. I actually have a question to both Commissioner Vella and to Minister Reizniece-Ozola about the potential necessity for the need for the European Commission to present new legislation on the link between biodiversity and renewable energy projects. Do you expect a draft law that would streamline the standards?
Yes, this is something that the Commission is already working on rather than legislation. We have already provided a number of guidelines between energy processes and their effect on biodiversity, and I think we will continue and we have in mind to carry on with coming up with these guidelines, because we cannot when it comes to energy, it's up to the member states to decide which type and which processes of energy they go for, but as long as they do it within these guidelines, then obviously we would be happy as well on that.
I think this would be more the question to the environmental minister, but as regards our presidency, we have the principle that we try to emphasize during our presidency, a better regulation, which means the implementation of the existing laws and the existing material that we already have on the place. So we wouldn't be proactive in proposing any new legislation specifically devoted to the protection of the biodiversity, because we also see that there are a lot of regulation already and guidelines and good material on spot, and the exchange of information and the exchange of the best experience, what we did also here, and what we also heard from the ministers, is of vital importance.
Thank you. Already in yesterday's discussions about the biodiversity, we had to conclude that the latest research proves that there are problems to ensure biodiversity in Europe and to protect it efficiently and effectively. So we have to look for the solutions to make sure that in 2050 we can live according to the 7th environmental program, which also sets the certain limits, that we should live within the limits that our planet is offering to us. I have heard opinions from the member states that probably we should speak more about details instead of designing grand strategies. I believe that the process which has started will feed also in our further work, and that later on probably there will be certain legislative initiatives as well. Thank you.
Paldies. Jautājumu, lūdzu.
Thank you. Any more questions?
It's Barbara Lewis from Reuters. I just wanted to ask everybody if the question of GMOs came up, because it was a very hot topic in Brussels, and there's been research showing that that impacts biodiversity, so I wondered if it was discussed. Never ask a yes, no question.
Just a small comment on that. No, it was not discussed, but as a point for information, I think this is going to be one of the items on the agenda for today's European Parliament, because I was talking to Giovanni Lavia and he said he has to go back because one of the items which is going to be discussed in Parliament is GMOs.
Up to the ministers, and it seems to be not probably the most important aspect within the current discussion how to find the balance. But that's an interesting question. I'm really surprised that nobody raised this issue. Thank you.
Any more questions, please? If there are no questions, that's the end of the press conference. And you're welcome to tomorrow's press conference. Thank you.